Hello, my doom scribblers. I'm going to start with a trigger warning. And I don't usually use trigger warnings because I think, we're all adults and we can take care of ourselves and make decisions for ourselves. But part of that decision making process must be, gosh, today I am low on spoons. If you don't know what spoon theory is, go look up spoon theory. Um, Today I'm low on spoons and I don't really want to think about something that might be activating to my trauma response. So, I'm going to be talking about sexual abuse. For those of you who don't want to think about that today, and you have no need to think about that if it's going to traumatize you, then switch this off. The doom scribblers are getting close to sending books to the boss. And this is a super vulnerable moment for a lot of people who have the kind of misbeliefs that tell them that they're never going to make it and they aren't talented, and the reason that they haven't hit it big yet is because blah 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 blah. So why do we believe these voices? Well, it actually goes to the biology of the brain. The brain has a built-in fight-flight response. So the amygdala is designed to be looking all the time, looking for threats to your bodily integrity. So your amygdala is literally still going, is there a lion? Is there a threat? Am I going to get knocked down by a car? Which is why it's always on the lookout for bad things. It's not because you are weak-willed. It is not because you are negative. It is not because you indulge yourself. It's because your brain is designed to try to keep you alive. So if you don't want the negative voices, the blah, blah, blah in your head to be the dominant voice, you actually have to work pretty hard to get that to level out, because your biology is working against you. Your biology is looking for the difference, the flaw, the negative, so that it can protect you, not because it wants you to be depressed for your entire life, but so that you can protect yourself. So, doom scribblers are sending the book to the boss, and I was in a room today where people were talking about their reactions, and everyone has been a pro. Everyone has been an absolute pro, taking it on the chin, taking themselves away, and going to a safe place where they can work on the emotional bit of it. And I happen to be friends with this writer in the real world. We know each other, so we know a bit about each other's stories. And I said, "How are you doing?" And they said, "Ah!" And I pretty much figured that was going on for them, because that would be what's going on for me, because Micah bounced the book back and said, "I want you to do this." And what he said was, we're writing to market, and the market currently wants something that's a bit different from what you've done. So dial this back a bit. Tiny note. Really, really tiny note. And specific and actionable and useful. But of course, if your misbelief is that you are less than, not good enough, never going to make it, what you do is pointless, you have no talent. If those voices in your head are dominant, then hearing, "Hey, I want you to make a little change," will activate all of those. And why? That doesn't seem logical at all, right? I want you to go look up something else. I'll put a link in the comments to both spoon theory and the grief in a box theory. So the grief in the box theory is that grief is like this massive ball inside a box. And at the edge of the box, there is a button that activates your grief response. So your sorrow and anguish. And the ball bounces around the box. And when something bad happens at first, grief is so huge, the ball of grief is so huge that it hits that button every time. So if there is some stimulus, some trigger that sets that ball in motion, it's going to hit the grief button, and you're going to be in that place where it is immediate and now and just like the day that it happened. And depending on whether or not you are able to shrink that ball, with the work that you do on yourself, whether or not that's in therapy, or some people believe that time shrinks grief, or whatever you have done to help heal that grief ball. So then it's smaller, right? And it bounces around the box, but when it hits that button activates grief as if it's happening right now. So this is why years after terrible things have happened, even if you've done all the work, that can be activated. Right now, it can be activated. If you are the survivor of sexual abuse, there is every chance that you were child sexual abuse, that you were either groomed or not believed, or had people minimize what happened to you. Very, very rarely after a child has been assaulted or raped does somebody respond with, wow, we are going to do something about that and we are going to go on this healing journey together. Usually children are not believed, things are minimized, children are robust, they get over these things. And in my case, I wasn't not believed, but when the next door neighbor told my mother that a 24-year-old man had assaulted a 7-year-old girl, my mother said, and the neighbor said, "Oh, Betty, you don't want to know." My mother didn't want to know because of her trauma. And so it wasn't that she didn't know, so she didn't want to know. And so the voices in my head tell this story about you need to be invisible. You should be invisible, and particularly your pain should be invisible because your pain is invalid. So those voices are very, very big in my head. And with the biological component of look for pain, you've got this self-compounding mechanism in your head that will keep those voices active just in case it's going to save your life. You have to actively shrink those voices so that you can hear, actually, that was somebody else's trauma. Their response to you when you were 7, 6, 5 was their trauma. And you deserve to be heard. It's really hard work, really hard work. So when it comes to being a writer and you're putting yourself out there and you are wanting your stories to be seen, and somebody says, "Oh, that's not right, let's retool that," instead of saying, "Okay, let's retool that," all of this is activated because you've hit that button and you're back there and you are in your trauma response. And so I said to this writer, I said, I know something about your story and I know that your trauma response is activated right now, but I'm here to hold up a mirror for you. And that mirror is to say, even though you were discounted and even though you weren't heard and even though your response right now is from your 7-year-old self, even though that's going on, it's not true. What's true is you are enormously talented. You have a voice. And what we need to do now is to work out how we get those voices to go down and how you hear the voices that say, "Don't give up. This is not the moment that you give up. I know you feel stalled and you feel stupid and small and as if you have no talent, but I'm here to tell you that you do. You do have the goods. And we need to go and we need to find a way to give that 7-year-old a hand out of their trauma response so that they can get back to, I deserve to tell my stories and I'm not going to give up." There are a lot of people who are in their trauma response, primarily in their trauma response, who never ever get to put their books out into the world because the minute they hear a no, what they hear is, "You are shit, you are pointless, there is nothing that you can do, you're always going to be wrong, nobody loves you, shut up, sit down, don't do it." And that's reality. That's actually their reality. And no amount of you saying, well, that's not true, stops it from being their reality. So we sit with the grief, and then we work out, is it revenge? Is it bloody mindedness? What is your survival mechanism for getting out of that trauma response and going back to the work and saying, you know what? You do not own the real estate of my mind. Somebody said something very smart today, which was, what the longest distance in the world is. Some of you have heard this before. The longest distance in the world is the distance between your head and your heart. Because intellectually we know these things, right? The brain is very fast processor. But knowing and actually being able to implement it at the heart level are two completely different things. So what I want to encourage all of you to do is to decide who owns the real estate of your mind. Do you want this misbelief that tells you that you are shit and pointless and nothing to win? Or do you want to join me and fight back against those shitty fucking shit fuck people who put those things in your mind and not let them win? I hope you will.